Thank you everyone again for joining me today. And let's go to our next workshop presenter. Jessica, why don't you take a second, introduce who you are, and then just give a little snippet of how you're connected to the adoption and foster care community.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Jessica Luciere. I am a Colombian transracial, transnational adoptee, and I grew up on Long Island in New York, and I'm connected to our community by being an adoptee myself, but I also have the privilege of working with the adoption and the adoptee community within my work at Spence Chapin. I am the manager of community engagements at Spence Chapin, which means that I oversee all of the programming that we have in place to support adoptees and their families from ages 0 through adulthood. From play groups to conversation spaces, to virtual spaces, to different kinds of workshops that we have. The work that I get to do, serving my community and creating opportunities for people that I never had is probably the most important work that I have ever done and will ever do.
As a transracial adoptee, how do you feel? I see that you are an advocate.
Yes.
What made you feel the need to be an advocate in your world?
I mean, I would say just in my own experiences of not really having any representation as an adoptee and not having any kind of experience with having community around me as I was growing up. I can see now, having been a part of a community that creates resources for adoptees, as being a mentor for almost 20 years now. To younger adoptees, I can see the benefit of it. I can see how widespread the education is needed, and especially to create education and resources from the experiences of adoptees themselves. And for those of us who are out there and able to create these kinds of spaces for people to connect, I think we're helping the future generations of younger adoptees find compatibility with other people, but to make their experiences feel more widespread and less kind of isolating.
So at Spence Chapin, you were one of the founding mentors to the New York City Team Mentorship Program. Am I correct? Just making sure I get that right.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you felt that, being involved in that? I mean, I speak to so many people, and I know when you yourself are an adopted person, translating that into your work is so important. And sometimes difficult, because now you're, rehashing things sometimes for some. Why do you feel that that's important? Why do you feel it's important to be a mentor and work in this field and keep you drive, like all of those things?
Yeah. I mean, I can't personally help but see these younger adoptees and not see myself, and not see in them the difference it makes to see the older versions of themselves, the possibilities that lie ahead in meeting older adoptees. Within our program, we don't have a one-to-one mentoring, we have a group mentorship program. So people have the opportunity to get to know all of their mentors. And so they get to see all of these different experiences, and to know how much that would have made a difference to not only me, but the other mentors that are in the program. That's why I think this format and this kind of programming and the importance of this will always be there. And adoptees, I think, feel drawn to wanting to also connect with younger adoptees, because in ways it's also an opportunity for us to be able to heal ourselves and to be there for the younger versions of ourselves. By being
when you say about connecting adoptees with their families, are you talking both types of families? Do you, as when you're doing mentorship, you help those with birth families and adoptive families and the connections between all of them?
Of course. We all have varied, as mentors, as the older adoptees, we have various different kinds of connections with our own families. So with our birth families or first families, with adoptive families, extended families, chosen families, all of that is that lives within the experience of being a mentor and a mentee within our program, because we're all living various relationships with everyone in our lives.
As I read a lot about you and your bio and the experiences that you had, you also were a former board member and president of All Together Now, based in Brooklyn.
Yes.
I'm just trying to get an idea of what kind of things you've done in the past, because it's so important for people to realize that, being in this world for so long, it's like a osmosis of information starts to happen. What was the All Together Now? What did you do there?
So I joined All Together Now as a board member, and I was part of the organization at a very interesting and kind of formative time. Our board had changed pretty significantly, and and what's great about All Together Now is that it focused in on a population of people, so those connected to adoption, adoptive families and their kids, creating programming specifically in Brooklyn. And Brooklyn is such a diverse neighborhood. So it was really great to be a part of something that was really kind of homegrown, very neighborhood oriented, and but still doing the very powerful work that's very much so like what we were doing in mentorship in Manhattan within Spence Chapin. I was involved in both at the same time. When I took on the role as president, our board had changed. We had gone from majority adoptive parents experience within the board to a majority adoptee experience, which I think really was really interesting, and especially again for that representation. It was really important to see adoptees who were coming back to do the work to create the community for the younger adoptees and for their families. It was really a wonderful experience, and it showed me a different kind of demographic, a different kind of experience, in knowing that people were coming in from so close, and they were able to create the bonds that were created within the organization, within their time together at the events, were translated into very close friendships and relationships that were made outside of that, and that they could keep it on, and they would grow with. And some of these families have stayed in each other's lives for many years.
So let's get into what your topic is going to be at the conference. So I have the title of the Adoptee Experience, Please Don't Touch Our Private Parts. What kind of things, you're going to do this as a co-presenter with a couple of other people. What
Yes.
other things will you be discussing in that topic? It's
Sure.
probably a big topic there.
Yeah. So it's a really it's exciting for me because I get to do this with Annette and with Chet, who I know through working with AFFCNY. I know a little bit closer by being an adoptee and being in several rooms with them, support groups and other community-based virtual spaces. And that's where this topic came up, is that we have seen the value of adoptees being able to connect virtually. We've seen the community that has grown. We have seen this just organic growth of adoptees within their experiences, growing their narrative, kind of growing their own relationship to their own identity as it changes by being with other adoptees. And that is what this conversation is about. It's about the things that we share within these spaces with one another that only we can understand. And it doesn't mean going into a space with other adoptees that you know. It means going into a space with adoptees from all over the planet, from everywhere. We share such a deep connectedness that these, don't touch our private parts. The private parts of our story are things that we may have to keep very sacred and create boundaries and limits with other people. But in these kinds of spaces, they're almost the things about us that we want to share in the upfront, because they're this connecting bonded experience that we all have with one another. And so in being in these rooms, in moderating these rooms, both within AFFCNY and through Spence Chapin, and kind of supporting each other in this work that we're doing, we can say from what we've seen how important these kinds of communities are and how they're different than other formats of adoptees kind of getting together. Being able to share space within your own space, right? Being virtual, sharing from anywhere in the world that you may be, and the empowerment that comes from that, and the change within the community, and how, new adoptees that come in and haven't been a part of these spaces get to find themselves, get to find community. And it removes, again, that sense of isolation by knowing that you could just tune into a Zoom call and find other people with shared experiences that give people such a sense of comfort and community. And that's generally what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's pros and cons to the virtual, but there's more pros to it than anything, especially that you can connect to people anywhere now,
Yeah,
which is amazing. Like people
totally.
that you would never have ever met, which opens you up so much.
Right.
Knowing, and I hate everyone says you're not alone, but it is so important to realize you're really not alone. So
Right.
you always can find that there's always one person that's, you can connect with and feel that there's something similar, because everyone's got their own story.
Yeah.
Sometimes you connect on that story, sometimes it's a little different, sometimes it's harder and better and this
Right.
and that, but at the same time, opening it up this way, you can find so many different people this way.
Yeah. And I think also with adoptees, the interesting experience is the sense of empowerment. By being in these rooms and being able to connect with other people, you feel empowered to own your story, to own your experiences, and to know that you can move out of spaces where it's just adoptee centric and move into the world and say, it's not just me, it's, I'm a part of many. There's a lot of great things that have come out of being able to connect via Zoom. And although we can get zoomed out and work and, those spaces, even though there may be a lot of them, I'm always, so excited to kind of be a part of and join and host myself.
The last question I always end off with, so that way everyone can hear from you. Why do you feel, because there's always a question of who this type of workshop would be for, who's it for? And I always believe all workshops would be for everyone. Why do you feel that everyone needs to come and hear this presentation?
I think it's important for everyone to come and hear this presentation because, adoptees are not a monolith, the adoption experience, the adoptee experience, the adopted person experience is very varied. And, to kind of better include the community that may not, just include the community that may not just be for the adoptee themselves, but for, those within the constellation to better understand the adoptee experience. I think hearing these narratives, hearing these stories, and hearing why, it can be difficult sometimes to share parts of your stories with non-adoptees, but you can share them with a group of strangers who are adopted. I think there's importance for people to understand, for adoptive parents to understand, for partners to understand, for siblings to understand. I think if we're all here to kind of connect with one another and better understand each other, especially with these very different lived experience, who may be living under one roof or who may be a part of one family, it's a really great experience to kind of hear from those who've been in these spaces, to see the value of what this can bring, to see if it's also something that, may work for somebody's family that they hadn't considered, that they didn't know existed. I think if anything, it's just finding more resources, not only for the adopted person, but again, for everyone connected to adoption. We're always learning, right? So let's keep learning from one another.